everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, that is Tim, and we talk about horror movies on this show. This episode, this is the winner of our last Patreon vote. Of course, every month on our Patreon, over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. There's a link in the description if you want to support the channel. That's the shilling out of the way. But on our Patreon, our $5 patrons get to vote between 4 movies, and we do one of those movies the following month. And the winner of the last vote was Audition. So here we are.
You know, I feel like I gotta sign up just so I can vote.
Why were you not happy with the pick this time?
No, no. I love this movie. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like my vote should still be heard.
Sure. We could put in a rule just saying that we could add our own 2 votes to it if you want, and you can add a vote. Don't worry, folks. That ain't happening. I'm not jeopardizing the integrity of the Patreon vote by letting Tim get his murky hands all over it.
I like the idea of being able to boss you around. Which, if I give $5, I could.
Nah, not for 5. I'll add a new tier, the boss around Peter tier. Could be a new nice source of income. $500 a month, Timmy, and you can boss me around.
Okay. That sounds good.
Thinking about it.
I'll use the bad credit card. Which is the one that gets declined all the time. All right.
well, any old one would do. Just put him on as expired. You're fine. He'll get declined instantly. And then the fraud police will come to your door.
Fraud police?
The fraud police, yeah. They're going to be like, hey, you, Tim, you're fraudulent.
Once again, I bow down to your knowledge of the law enforcement.
Oh, it's second to none.
Yeah.
They bust down the door and say, right, fraudy.
No.
You get in the slammer. You have the right to bring 2 Hellboy statues and no more.
Alright, well, prison might not be so bad.
I can stare at Hellboy all day. Prisons will be fine. No, you're talking about.
Well, as you know, they're trying to colonize Mars at the moment, and I keep trying to think like, all right, if I'm one of those people that, gets called to Mars or whatever, like, if I could bring only 10 books with me.
I think if we get to the point where we're actually going to have people on Mars, I don't think it's going to be conscription, Tim, where you get called upon to go. I think people who are going have maybe volunteered or signed up or went through a fair bit of process before they get to go. Well,
it's
not jury duty. You don't get a letter through the door. Oh, Tim, you have been selected to live on Mars. You cannot turn this down. It is your duty as a citizen of Earth.
Well, I kind of imagine that they're gonna want like the best and the brightest, the most shining examples of humanity.
So Melissa's getting invited, and you're getting dragged along as a spouse, as the +1.
That's the plan. But yeah, I've been thinking a lot lately. Like, if I had to pare everything down to like, I mean, I don't know what you're allowed to bring if you go to Mars, but I imagine you can bring at least like 10 books and 10 movies.
No one has written these rules yet because there's never been anyone to go to Mars. No one's ever colonized like a planet before, so there's no rules for this. They'll make them up at some point later. When they've actually got like maybe a hint that they'll actually pull it off in some way.
Okay.
Right, we're a bit early. We're in the early stages of the colonization process of Mars.
Yeah, I tell you what, Final Crisis is definitely going to be one of them.
The DC Comics event written by Grant Morrison.
Yeah, I feel like that's a good book. Like that can, that's when you can reread a lot. It's very meaty. That's a good choice.
Yeah, I would bring 10 omnibus because they're bigger. I could have lots of omnibus.
I guess.
Here's 1,500 pages in that one. All right, there you go. Who my kid? I would bring my tablet because I'm in the 21st century and all my library is on one device.
Okay, yeah, because they're gonna have sockets on Mars where you can plug it in.
Of course they will. Tim, we're not going to colonize Mars and not bring electricity with us. Solar panels, come on. All right. Well, with that out of the way, should we actually get to the task at hand and talk about the movie?
Yes, I've been trying to bring us back to the movie for 10 minutes.
Oh, screw you, Tim. No, you have not. I feel like it took us like 15 minutes to start on Friday the 13th last week, and then this week, I feel like you're trying to like, break the record, and I'm like, no, Tim, I'm not having it. We're getting to 5 minutes of nonsense, and then we can get into the movie. Oh
Yeah, well.
dear. Ah, this business we call show.
Okay.
That's a phrase. I didn't make that up. That's a thing.
No, just you think this is show business?
This is show business. What are you talking about? I am I'm the showman, and you're the gorilla that comes out and entertains the crowds because you're kind of like the, you know.
So the one that everyone loves, that the one that people come to see and want to get autographs from, and
get autographs from the gorilla.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm the conman, the PT barman, and you're the sideshow person.
Coco the gorilla. I don't know. Sure.
Oh dear. Somehow we'll get onto the movie now, which is Audition. That's what won. I don't know if I said that. I mentioned there was a vote. I don't know if I said that's what the winner was, but Audition won the vote. Audition, of course, a Japanese horror film from 1999. Takashi Miike, the director. In fact, me and Connor just did one of his newest movie. Well, I say newest. He's made 100 movies, so he's pumping them out so quick that I don't know if Blade of the Immortal is the newest one, but it was a relatively new one when we did it a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I've been meaning to see that. I heard good things about it.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. But of course, not a horror movie, so that's why it's not on this show. And Audition is, and it was voted for by the good friends of the show, our patrons, who decided to give us a break this month and give us a good movie. I'll be honest, it's been so long since that vote that I can't remember what it was up against, so I can't even say for sure if the options were bad. But
I think Houseu was one of them, which is always a fun one.
Oh yeah, it was all. I
I
think it was all Japanese movies. I think you're right. Yeah. I think that's what it was. But Audition won, so we're going to talk about that. So we'll start spoiler free as we typically do, and then we will give you a warning and we'll go into spoilers.
One thing I do want to bring up: if someone hasn't seen it before and they're wondering if they should see it, I would honestly say shut this off right now and watch it first, because I do think people say this a lot and like it's kind of like whatever, but I do honestly think this is one of those movies where the less you know about it, the better.
I'll be honest, I think I kind of agree with that to a point, but I think the biggest thing that I would say you should avoid is knowing it's actually a horror movie. But the fact that it's on this show means you already know that. Because I feel like if you just stumbled onto this on TV one night and you thought it was like a romantic film about a guy trying to find a new wife because he's been a widower for a few years, you'd be like, oh, this is a sweet little romance about him trying to find a wife. But look, a few questionable techniques, of course. But and then but there's a turn at some point, So I mean, you've already spoiled that because I usually say the premise and then I say, hey Tim, did you like the movie? And you've ruined that. You've ruined the format of the show. We're done. We're never doing our episode again.
Well, start holding auditions for a new co-host.
Anyway, so the premise of the movie is we have this character, a widower. He's a producer as well. He works in movies and TV, and basically his friend, when after his son kind of suggests maybe you should find a girl and get married again, he says this to his friend who works with him, and his friend says, hey, we'll set up a movie and we can have auditions. And the movie might happen, it might not, but the real reason for it is for you to, meet all these ladies and then maybe call one of them. And so, obviously, this is morally in the grey side of things. Absolutely. Yeah. He's basically going shopping. He even says at one point, as he's looking through all their resumes, that's not the word you use in movies. I've forgotten it now. Their portfolio?
The headshots? I mean, headshots like
a headshot's a headshot, but there's a specific word for it in film, and it's not. You don't call it a resume.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Yeah.
Damn it. I should know this. I did know this. Damn it.
Mm,
Anyway, so
mm.
so he does this and he picks one that he realizes. But I was going to say, yeah, he says actually as he's looking through them, he says, "Oh, I'm like a kid at Christmas." I was like,
Yeah.
oh, no, the line was, I was like, "I'm buying my first car," and I'm like, "Yeah, way to objectify them. Good
Well,
job."
well, I do think there is a way to do a nicer, more like rom-com kind of version of this.
Oh, sure,
Um,
yeah, I agree with
but
that.
I always forget though when you watch this that they're super gross. Like in the auditions, like they're asking them questions about like sex and like how they would feel about like like stuff about like prostitution and nudity, and one of the girls even gets naked and it's like, oh yeah, like I yeah, it's not as innocent as it kind of sounds like.
No, no, they are
Oh
abusing. And this is very relevant, actually. They're in
yeah.
the film industry and they were abusing young actresses for
Mhm,
their own gratification.
mhm,
Um, and seemingly, yeah. I mean, they flat out are. I mean, it's not necessarily assault in like in what we've seen recently with certain figures, Weinstein. Uh, but the like you get this sense like, oh, we can get away with this because we're producers, and
yeah.
like they're asking all these really absurd questions, and there's one we don't get to see like how it leads to like one of them stripping. We just sort of see it in the montage that someone
Mhm,
strips, and it's like, did you ask her to do that? Why?
yeah.
Like this was already kind of seedy enough, and then now you're
Yeah.
yeah, whole thing. Um,
And on top of the fact too that these all like they're pretty old dudes, and these all seem like pretty young.
yeah,
Uh,
they're middle aged. He wants a young wife, and
yeah.
the one he ends up kind of like courting is 24,
Yeah.
probably half his age or close
Mm,
to. So yeah, but of course there's a turn. It goes into horror. I can't really say what that is because I think it would spoil
yeah.
too much. So
Yeah.
for the spoiler free, let's just say that. But they begin a bit of a budding romance. She seems to respond to his advances,
Mm.
and he's very excited about this. And there you go. That's the premise of Audition. Uh,
So I'm curious. When was the first time that you saw this? Like early 2000s, I'm guessing.
yeah, I've only seen it the once before now. I saw it
Oh, really?
about yeah, probably about 15 years ago.
I don't know what this says about me, but I think I've seen it at least like 4 or 5 times.
Because
I
this
know
is
just as recently as last year I watched it.
Jesus, Tim. Is this because this is your dream job? You want to be able to just like have like a
No.
audition day? All right. Let's just get 30 ladies in here, and I'll just I'll ask them questions. It's a
I
job interview.
for me when I this was one of those kind of like I don't want to say legendary, but like it was a movie in the early 2000s, like kind of like before like the internet was super huge and stuff. It was one that I would just kind of hear people talking about, like, have you heard about this movie? Like it's super messed up, and it is one of those ones like,
Hmm.
oh, like they won't show it in America, like oh, we gotta find it, you gotta import a copy or something. And it was just one of those kind of like, ooh, like I've heard about this movie, and so yeah, I bought it, and then it was when I was younger then, and you'd watch a lot more movies with friends and stuff. This was kind of one of those movies where I watched it, and then I was like, oh my god, like and then I call my friend up like, come over, you gotta watch this movie and stuff. So
Hmm.
I've seen it a bunch, and yeah, it was weird like the first time when I watched it again, because it does start off yeah, like so kind of innocent, like obviously it's gross what they're doing and stuff, but it does seem like, oh, this is just like a weird like kind
Yeah,
of romantic comedy kind of
they're
thing.
they're abusing their power. You could see it being a romantic comedy setup, where like, oh, we'll do this, but you can come and sit in the auditions, and you can sort of
Yeah,
use it to like, oh, like flirt with like a couple of them you like or whatever. Like you can see
yeah,
kind of where they would do it with the rom-com version, but they are abusing their power, and it is clear that it is kind of wrong because even like our main character, Aoyama, he actually like says, "Oh, I feel like a criminal. I feel like we're doing something wrong
yeah,
here," and he mentions it and stuff. And I think the smart thing is they make him kind of likable though, where you see that he's pretty good with his son, you see that he's pretty
mm,
good with other people. He's not necessarily an awful person, but he is,
yeah.
this is questionable.
Yeah, certainly the kind of like the grosser, more instigator guy seems to be his friend,
Yeah.
and he kind of seems to just kind of be going along with it. It doesn't even really feel like he wants to find someone else at first. It seems like more on the like insistence of his like son and stuff that they're kind of like, oh no, like you should go out there and find someone to. It seems like he's still is getting over his dead wife, even though it's been a number of years.
Yeah, it's about a decade, I think. Just
Mhm.
just based on the kid and like
Yeah.
how much he's grown since the flashback at the start. So that
But yeah, when once they're obviously, we already said it is a horror movie, so at some point there is a flip, and then once that happens, it
and
is kind of like, holy shit.
and you know the funny thing is the flip is just like one shot. There's just this
Mhm.
one shot inserted at one point. All I'll say is a scene with a phone ringing, and all of
Yeah.
a sudden it's like, when did this get so intense? What's happening?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, there's something more going on here. And then the movie progresses from there, uh, and obviously a big part of this is that it's kind of like like we have this female villain who, and that's why the movie works so well, is that they are doing this awful thing where they're abusing their power to essentially pick from a a bouquet of women, like, oh, which one do I want to date?
Yeah.
And it's kind of comeuppance for that in a sense. It is kind of this very sort of deeply ingrained feminine revenge story, but of course she's also pretty messed up and like
Yeah.
it's just like the punishment doesn't really quite like balance out with the crime per se
Oh,
here.
sure.
Especially with Sims, again, he doesn't seem as bad as his friend. He doesn't seem as bad as a lot of other people. It feels kind of like,
Yeah.
like she takes it to the extreme, certainly. So
I mean, there is someone that definitely doesn't get what they deserve.
yes, yes. I had to think about it for a second, but yes, yeah. So no, but it's a movie that flips, and it's yeah, it's funny
It's
actually. Cause
unsettling, I guess, would be
it's very
would be a
unsettling. But
good way.
I watched. I have the Blu-ray of this, right? And I bought the Blu-ray when
Oh,
it came out like 5 years ago, and I'd never watched the disc, right? Because I put it in, and I'm like, I don't recognize these menus, I don't recognize any of this. This is the first time I've ever had this on, and I played the movie.
wait, you don't understand the concept of a menu?
This specific menu I didn't
Okay, okay.
recognize, therefore I knew that I'd never watched the Blu-ray before. Not that I
Okay.
didn't understand how it functioned. God damn it, Tim.
Well, I
So,
don't know.
but when I played the movie, there was two introductions that played before it. You had one from the director, Takashi,
Okay.
and he's a movie. I will say this: the subtitle translation here was really bad because I don't think it was quite getting across the meaning of what they were saying. It was almost
Okay.
like someone just like translated it word for word directly, so it just came out
Yeah.
sounding weird in English. Because obviously
Yeah.
different phrases have different meanings in different languages, and we phrase things in a different way, and so on. And then the second one was with the actress who plays Asami,
Oh.
the lead, and
Yeah.
she basically said, I think this movie is more interesting because it's a horror film where all the women can like root for the villain, and like the men can be terrified, and if you are a man, put yourself in the shoes of the man in this film, and that makes it more interesting. And that like again, the
Ooh.
subtitles were really bad for this because it
Yeah.
was like that was probably phrased slightly differently. Um,
Oh, that's interesting. I like that though.
yeah, but yeah, so it's a horror movie for asshole men, which actually, funnily enough, feels very relevant right now. Like, hey, he's even a producer in the movie business. Here, take it. Have Weinstein watched this in a loop, like in prison for the rest of his life. That seems fitting. But hey, so yeah, that's the gist of the movie. And honestly, I think we can talk about a whole lot more without spoilers. So,
Yeah.
I'll say I like it, of course. I think
Yeah.
it's a very slow build, of course, because it starts off like a very different film, and then it kind of brings the creepy stuff in.
Mm.
And I think part of the point though is that we're saying that he is going along with this plan that is really kind of sexist and objectifying.
Mm.
He is otherwise relatively likable, and you get the
Mm.
kind of point is that a lot of the small little sort of institutionalized sexism is very subtle and stuff where he doesn't necessarily come off as a villain for any of the other little things, but you kind of notice all these little moments where, okay, yeah, that's racking up, like all these little things that,
Yeah.
the way he treats his assistant is
Mm.
we find out more about that later on. Okay, that's kind of fitting into that category. The way he's like, oh, I want this, this, and this, you know, because when his friend asks him, okay, so what sort of girl are you looking for? He's like, oh, I want her to have a skill that she can play the piano or dance, and I don't want her to be this or that, but I do want her to be this, and I don't want her to be too young, but I don't want her to be too old either. Like, he's really specific. And then they basically go shopping for a girl. It's like really, again, really objectifying, but that's kind of the point, because that's kind of what the semi-revenge element of the movie is that she's basically out to get anyone who's objectifying women, is kind of the thing. In her own really weird, messed up way. It's not like she has that mission statement. It's just kind of like that's what's kind of what she's doing based on her backstory and her weird, like, just the way her mind works. But yeah, so that's very good, very very intense, and it does make you think, because you sort of stop and think what a couple of things mean, and you think about you know what exactly really happened towards the end and some stuff like that. So yeah. Any spoiler-free final thoughts, Tim, before we break open the wall?
No, I think we just need to get into the spoiler.
Cool. Full spoilers then for Audition from this point on. So, right, so he calls her, and there's some nice little touches where he's guilty, because when he's looking at all the resumes, like, he turns his dead wife's photo away. He's like, I can't have her looking at me. I'm going to turn that away. There's little things like that were really good. But he calls her, and they end up meeting up, and like she's like, oh, I want to see you again. It seems like a nice, again, it's kind of romantic comedy. It feels like a sweet first date. She's a little bit quiet. She's a little bit awkward, but
and she seems like kind of like surprised, like,
yeah,
oh, like I didn't think that, like, you were gonna like call me, or that you're interested in me.
And she comes across as very timid as well, which I guess is like part of the whole like the flip kind of thing, where, you know, like kind of like one of the things I love about Under the Skin is that Scarlett Johansson in that movie kind of lures men into a van, because like no one, like no like, if any woman said, oh yeah, I get into a white van with a strange man who said he'd give me a lift home, like everyone would basically say, were you asking to be murdered? Like, you know, that would be the response. But it kind of like preys upon the whole idea that, oh no, men feel invincible, like, what can a woman do to me? Yeah. And that movie kind of plays with that, and it's like, no, so like, and this kind of does that in a weird way, where it's like she's very timid. So, oh, like, and he feels invincible, like, oh, like, you know, if anything comes up, I'll handle it, because his friend's very, like, you know, like, her backstory's not quite checking out. There might be something weird about her, and he's like, nah, if anything arises, he's like, well, you know, what's going to happen? Like, I can take care of myself. It's fine. Like, you know, he writes it off.
Man, Under the Skin, I really like that movie, but what a bummer.
What's a bummer?
Under the Skin.
Oh yeah, it's a great movie.
I
love it.
It's depressing.
Oh, it's really depressing. It's basically about how awful we are as a species. That's what that movie's about.
Some of us.
You.
I don't know about that.
So yeah, so they have a date, and then they have another date, but between the dates, because his friends like made him promise not to call her until he digs into her past a bit more, but he can't help it. He really wants to. So you see him staring at the phone, and this is where, because we're maybe like 45, 50 minutes in at this point, right?
Yeah.
And this is where it cuts to her at her place, and there's a really ominous like sack, just big enough for a human body to be in it, right? Just like behind her, and she's just sort of sitting there with her hair down, like, you know, all almost like, you know, Grudge ring-esque with her hair down, and she's just waiting. It's very ominous, and again it goes back to him. He's avoiding that again for a while. And what's interesting actually is the moment that he actually decides to call her is after the second scene with his assistant, because there's a scene earlier on, like when we first see him at work, he has this female assistant who comes up to him, and like she's like, okay, so this and this for the day, moving this meeting around tomorrow, blah blah blah, and they're leaving for the end of the day, and she's like, oh sir, and he's like, oh, is there something you want to tell me? And she comes out and says, oh, I'm getting married, by the way, to someone you don't know. And he's like, oh, congratulations. It's very awkward. It's very, very awkward. And it's kind of like, okay, it's like, and because it's been a long time since I've seen it, I couldn't really remember where this was going with this character, and I was like, all right, so they're playing that she has a crush on him. Is that what this is? And he's ignoring, like, because I think part of his like, again, his faults as a character, his faults as a person, is that there's this real person who is closer to his age that is interested in him, but yet he wants to like ignore her and chase the dream of the perfect 24-year-old woman who has all the skills that he wants. Like, just this idealistic, like, you know, this is unattainable. What are you doing, you silly old man?
Unobtainium.
Unobtainium, yes. from the classic Basically, a, a modernized version of a stone tablet that will be looked upon in the future to like distinguish who we were as a civilization. That film that is Avatar.
Okay. Then-
Hey, you
I'm
went
never
there.
gonna
I
dig
made it
deep into
weirder.
that.
I'll do that, Tim. Don't you worry. So yeah, so we had that scene earlier on, and then this scene here just before he does this, because he's been avoiding it. He keeps looking at the phone, but he keeps not doing it. And he's at work, and his assistant comes in, and she's like, "Oh, that's me going for a day." And he's like, "Okay, bye." And she keeps standing there, and he's like, "Oh, is there something else you want to tell me?" And she's like, "No." And she says something else. She kind of makes an excuse as to why she's still standing there, and then she leaves. And again, it's like this awkward kind of, "Oh, she's interested in him. There's something here." And that's, you know, he gets up to leave, and he stops and goes back and goes to the phone, and it's kind of like this moment where, like, being presented with the again this more realistic option, it's made him like long for the fantasy again. So he's like run back to the phone, and honestly, maybe my favorite moment in the entire film is when it cuts back to her place and the phone rings, and there's this shot of her like she's still got her head down, her hair's all down, and the camera's just low looking up at her. You can just hair's covering a lot of her face, but you can make out her mouth, and she just smiles slowly as the phone's ringing. I loved it. It's like that's the moment where it's like he is screwed. I don't know what she's going to do to him, but he is screwed. She is going to brutalize him in some way. It is a fantastic moment. That is the moment where you realize, and because the earlier time you see her place and you just see the static shot of her like there, I was like, okay, that was really tense and creepy. But this smile, it was like, no, she has got evil intentions. Whatever's going to happen. So good.
It's like yeah, like all the stuff before it, like I mean obviously there's no need to have much like of a director's flair for all this kind of simple mundane normal stuff, but it's very forgettable. But then once it gets into this creepy stuff, like not even just like in terms of tones of the movie, but like the way it looks is like it's like, oh, like this is so much more ominous, and it really gives you like, oh, like I can see where the talent is coming from in this director, like where they can
I think it's
like set
very
up these shots and stuff, just make it look so creepy and foreboding.
I think it's very intentional that the first half of the movie, before the creepy stuff starts, it is very like long static shots, and then as you get to the second half, it becomes more quick and frantic. It's like it is ramping up. It does that quite intentionally. I think it also
like
plays
a
with
lot of the
I was gonna say it also plays with the color. You'll notice there's a lot of like really sort of like blue tinted stuff earlier on when he's like first talking to her, and then as he's like getting more excited, it becomes more warm. There's more like warm oranges and browns and kind of like okay, so it's more homely now because he's excited, and it's like nah, that's not warmth, that's danger. Like red means danger, dumbass. But yeah. Oh, I thought you had something, Tim, because
well, yeah, I mean, just skipping ahead a little bit, but just kind of like you were saying, yeah, like I do like when it gets to the point when they're having these really like kind of quick like cuts to like very like gross disturbing things, like when they're showing like disembodied parts and stuff, and yeah, like you said, like it's a lot more like frantic and unsettling.
yeah. Yeah. So the big thing that happens though is after they have like a second date, there's like a third date that's just like a weekend away or whatever, and he's going to propose to her very quick, might I add. But they're at the hotel, and he's like, "Oh, so we'll do this. We'll go to the pier. We'll go to this great little coffee shop I know around here, and we'll do all these things." And she just like is really quiet. She turns off the light, strips, and gets into bed, and it's all very. It just shows like these scars on her leg, which is implied that this is like the like her hip problem that she got when she was in ballet years before, because that was like her backstory that she said she had. And he gets into bed. It does this weird cut where it's like, okay, we don't see any sex, we just see him wake up next, and he's on her own. So the next chunk of the film is actually him looking for her, like because he can't find her. He doesn't know where she lives. She's kind of like kept that secret. She doesn't know how to contact her. She's not answering the phone, and it's like, okay. So he goes. It turns almost into a detective movie for a little bit with him trying to like track her down. and going to like the bar she said she worked. Because we hear early on that she had this agent from a music company, like this music record label, but then we found out the guy she said was her agent was already dead and had been had been missing for a year and a half. And then the boss she said she had at this bar, when he goes to it, it turns out no, he got killed. Like, he was chopped into pieces, by someone crazy. Apparently she was chopped into pieces, and apparently she was having an affair with this guy in the record company. And I'm like, oh wait a minute. I'm like, so did the Sammy get jealous? Was she like, into this record label guy, and then found out about this affair, and like that's like what set her off in that time? She went nuts. Because our big thing, like before they may have had sex in bed, because we don't know if they did or not. Really, it's kind of left ambiguous. But they probably did. They probably did.
Yeah.
But is that she's like, oh, will you love only me? No one else, just me. So you kind of get that she's got a thing. She's got this concern that men sleep around. They don't stay faithful. That's like one of her concerns. That said, though, it kind of turns out later on that she even means like anyone, like him loving his son to her is a betrayal. No, you love only me. No one else. Can't love anyone else. Even in an unromantic setting or form, no one else. But so because this thing where he's trying to track her down and he's trying to find her, and he doesn't. He never quite gets there. He does get to this creepy dude though at the in the sort of the dance hall that he goes to, and this guy's playing piano, and we see that he's had like his shins like cut into, and he's got these big stitches, and we get this weird flashback where he seemingly like assaulted Asami when she was younger. He was like the her ballet teacher, and he was like he was like burning her thighs. Like those scars on her thighs are not from like an operation. That's like him burning her flesh with an iron.
Yeah, these scenes of him just like slowly crawling towards her on the floor, holding the pokers out, are so like like there's stuff in the movie that I think is like creepy and scary, and then there's stuff like
not
this
to mention,
just...
you say that he's got crawling towards on the floor. We should also mention that the way she's sitting, she's got her legs open, because I think the sexual imagery here is kind of the big thing. It's like she's being taken advantage of, even if it's not sexual in this sense. It's like the idea of okay, like a man's exploiting her by opening her legs and doing something that he wants to do. Again, like there's imagery to like sort of play up those themes here.
Yeah, and the movie does like a lot of stuff. I feel like where there's like the creepy stuff with like the sack on the floor, but then there's also stuff like this that is just like, all right, it's not like that kind of horror movie scary where a ghost is attacking someone or something, but it's like it's almost like a real world like disturbing. That's like, oh
yeah, there's almost there's kind of a comment here because she's in ballet and then she's obviously the whole plot of the movie is the audition for the fake audition, which is for him to find a girlfriend. But I think the whole part of the commentary is the idea that at least sometimes in certain cultures it's kind of like women do have to audition in a weird way for the men to be like their partners, and it's kind of like sort of taking that and making it, and that's why he's in the movie industry, because it's not just because it works for the plot, but it's also kind of a thematic thing, because in the movie industry, in the ballet, you'd have to audition to get onto like a show. Any of these things require auditions, and it's the idea that the woman has to prove herself worthy of the man, and it's kind of like taking that and saying, hey, that's bullshit, and turning that in his head and turn it into this vengeance story. So
it could also like I feel like you could also maybe see some similarities to kind of making a point about like even young kids being taken advantage of by like the entertainment industry, like like obviously he's not a big producer, but he was trying to teach like this kid like to perform and stuff, and like in a way kind of just like messing her up, and it's it's not fun.
No, it's not.
It's not super fun to watch.
It's uncomfortable, but you feel that the entire time. You feel the uncomfort, and you feel like she is the way she is because she was exploited as a child in multiple ways.
And it also kind of makes you feel like some of the people she's taking revenge on as like an older, some of it is kind of like I mean, yeah, maybe they don't deserve it that much, but then you do also kind of like, well, I do want to see her get revenge on some people. Like, you definitely want to see this guy,
Yeah.
get what's coming to him.
Yeah, and it seems like she's kept him alive. Although it is question. I mean, you can question. Well, we'll get to. I need to go further on the plot. So basically,
Yeah.
eventually, she like we see like a POV shot in his house, and it's like someone's drugging his whiskey or whatever it is he's got in the bottle, and
Because I think we might have skipped. Did we skip over the scene where she comes into his house before anyone's home?
that's what I just said. The POV shot. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, that's the POV shot. Yeah, but and so we assume it's her, obviously. And she's looking around, and then he comes home. His son's away over somewhere else, to, his friend's house or whatever. And he takes a drink and he gets knocked out. And this is where the sort of the big sort of final 20 minutes of the movie kind of like happen, right?
Yeah.
He's down on the floor. He's been paralyzed. He's awake and he's aware. And she's like, there's a great thing here where when he first sees her, she's like through the crack of the door. And she's got like her apron on and her gloves on, and it's the shot they use for most of the covers now in the DVDs and Blu-rays is her holding the syringe, looking down at him. That's like the big thing that they always use now for the image. Oh, that's not that one. That's the Wire.
You're right.
Mine is the syringe.
Oh yeah. All right. I've seen that one too.
So.
But he has the gloves and the apron on.
Yeah, so like, and this is where it gets really uncomfortable, just from like a physical, like watching what's happening sense, because we see like as he's knocked out, like he has like these like almost dream sequences, and people debate actually as to how much of a dream sequence these are, or because you see like scenes we had earlier on where they're talking to each other, but instead of playing out the way they did, she actually tells him a lot of honest things about her backstory, about being abused, about all these things. We see her kill the guy, the shins, the piano player. We see her like use a wire to like actually like cut off his head, and the sound effects are like crunching, and we see his neck like being sucked in with the wire before it's actually starting to like properly break him. There's like really really like violent, and we see like he has this nightmare sequence where he's on a date with her, but then his dead wife and like is at the table next to him along with his assistant and his son's girlfriend, which is one of the things that then gets to is that we have this kind of like sequence where the assistant is with them, and this is where it reveals to us in his dream where she's like, hey, I we had sex that one time and then you've just ignored me since, and he's like, I didn't realize that was like a big thing, I'm sorry that's like affected you so much. And then it turns into his son's girlfriend, and what I like is up until this point, like there's been no hint that he's like had any inappropriate thoughts about her, but you get kind of what's happening here is like everyone he's had some sort of thought about in some way, even if it was subconscious, even if he like wasn't actively thinking about this teenage girl, like it's in there because he like the idea that all of the ills of like all the bad thoughts that lots of men have are all happening, like, and he's almost getting like a kind of like a purgatory thing where like all of his sins are like coming before his eyes, but they're all of this particular subject. And the teenage girl like starts to unbuckle him, and she's like, oh, like, oh look, like how uncomfortable do you feel when she says he's got a hard on?
Oh, super.
That is like so uncomfortable. And he's like, no, don't do it, because he's thinking like a reasonable person. Like, no, I'm not. No, like the teenage girl, like even if my mind might have floated at one point, but no, like he's trying to stop. And then we get, of course, the big visual thing that I think most people remember is the body of presumably the record label dude who's been missing, getting out of the sack. And as we found out from the crime scene from the bar, that had the body was cut up, but the police found 3 extra fingers and a tongue. This guy has no tongue; it's been cut out. He's missing fingers. He's missing feet. So he's just kind of crawling, and Asami feeds him something, but she vomits in it first.
He basically has like a dog bowl that she throws up in, and then that's like his dinner.
And this is where it's kind of weird. It's like, well, how could he be having a dream about this? Is this like mixed with sort of something that's actually happening? Is she telling him this as he's like unconscious? Like, what's
it kind of? I mean, because we've seen in the movie that she does have this sack in her apartment, which like I don't think we're given any reason to believe that that's not real. So
No, because
uh,
some people do like to argue that he actually starts his dream at the sex scene, and everything after that is actually questionable
okay,
if it's real. But even that's after the first time we see the sack.
okay, yeah.
That's after that. So
So I guess the way I always kind of took it is like I mean, so we already know that there's a sack that is in our apartment that she sits weirdly like in front of. So I don't know. It kind of feels like this stuff is real, but I mean, obviously, um, he's dreaming about it now. I don't, but I don't know. It feels like this actually takes place, but he is somehow dreaming about it as well. I don't
yeah,
know.
it's kind of abstract. It's kind of intentionally abstract.
Yeah.
But but he wakes up, but he's lying there paralyzed, and she like she puts needles into his stomach. And then one of the things that I'd forgotten she did here actually, because I remember obviously this scene's the one that everyone remembers, no matter how long it's been. But I'd forgotten that she puts the needles in his stomach and then slides up his stomach, sort of pushing them all in further. And then
Ugh.
before she puts some in his eyes, which again really, oh god, no. Uh, but of course, before she gets out her wire and she's like, "Oh, this is going to, like cut through your flesh and bone, no problem." And she starts,
Yeah.
and she has to like
And,
sort of like go like this because she wraps it around his foot and she starts going like this to like
yeah.
slice through it until it pops off.
And the whole thing is like as she's doing it, she's like smiling, she's very gleeful.
Yeah,
When she's sticking the needles in, she's going like deeper, deeper, like like in a very like almost like a like seems like the way like a child would be playing, like
yeah, and
it's,
obviously, because I mean, obviously she's already crossed the line because I mean the guy is
she killed the dog, so
she
that's
killed
the
the
first
dog.
line she crosses.
That's the first line she crosses. She's already crossed the line with this revenge, though, because
Yeah.
as much as the guy's had some objectifying thoughts. He went along with this audition thing. He doesn't quite deserve this, but where she officially definitely crosses the line is when she starts threatening his son. When she's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
you love your son as well. Maybe I'll have to teach him a lesson or something. Whatever she says." And when the son gets in, of course, it gets very tense because she's hiding and like he's looking and he sees his dad, and then like, it becomes a bit of a chase, and eventually she gets kicked down the stairs, and that like sort of like kills her, and that that leads to like phoning the police and whatnot. Obviously, we should mention during this, just before she like attacks the son, there's actually a cut, and it does this fake out where it makes you think that he's been dreaming all this.
Oh yeah.
From when he had sex with her, like he wakes up in that bed in the hotel and she's still there. Like him waking up and her not being there, like this was all his fears of like getting together with someone again. But then it's sort of double bluff shoot, and then he wakes up. This was a dream. This was him fantasizing in this moment that this was all a dream, and everything's okay, but it's not. So sure enough, the kid ends up kind of killing her, accidentally, and and that's and he calls the police, and that's kind of the thing. That's the movie, but so, but it's super dark, and I kind of I think obviously it's like it's an interesting villain because obviously she's very surreal and she's very like cause she seems to just sit around waiting until the thing she wants to do, which is hunt this guy. She's the hunter and she's going after her prey. I have questions like before, like was it always a case of hunting them like from the first time she accepted the phone call, or was it a couple of dates, he's like every other man, he cares about other people, so therefore I'm going to do this.
I think my interpretation was that yeah, she genuinely did like him, but
Mm,
um, as soon as she realizes like, oh, you're not 100% about me. There are other people in your life that you love as well. You're just like every other man, which means it's time for you to go.
yeah, I think the movie's about his unhealthy like wanting the idealistic thing and ignoring what's right in front of him with the assistant who clearly cares for him. uh,
Yeah.
and this objectifying, wanting the young pretty, like being really specific about what he wants, and
Yeah. And then because like everyone was warning him like, ooh, like yeah, this seems really weird. Like none of her resume are checking out. Like you should probably leave this alone. But kind of like you said, still being insistent and smitten with the kind of like,
yeah,
oh yeah, the perfect girl, the young, and I think maybe even like in a way like that some people are kind of like, oh, this damaged person, I need to fix them, like almost like
Hmm.
you know, I feel like there's a little bit of a sense of
And then
about him like that, like, oh, I have to be the big protector man.
I think the other side of it as well is that the idea that she is the way she is because she was created by this happening to her. She was
Oh yeah,
created by obviously a much more extreme example, and that's why she's
yeah,
an extreme example of like a revenge side of it. But
yeah,
like, it was someone exploiting her and objectifying her to the extreme, to the almost extreme as you could go, that made her, and that's why she's a product of this world. So as much as she goes too far and like our main character doesn't necessarily deserve exactly what happens to him, it's like no, she was created by this culture, and
Mhm.
I mean, not him personally, but everyone as a whole is to blame for this kind of thing happening in a way, thematically. I mean, not not literally every man's to fault for this one crazy asshole who was burning her and making her
Yeah,
dance for his amusement and whatever else. But
yeah,
uh, so it's oddly timely. I didn't realize when this won the vote that I'd be like, oh, this is actually really timely with everything that's going on with Me Too
yeah,
and the industry and all the stuff that's happening right now. Um, but it actually is very relevant.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was actually kind of surprised because at first I was thinking um, like, oh, this doesn't really hold up because just the idea of like people holding auditions for a wife now seems like really outdated. But then when I watched, I was like, oh wait, no. If anything, this is more relevant because of those like
In fact,
ideas and
Joe,
stuff.
it's funny because I said I didn't realize how relevant this was going to be. Is because it had been a long time since I'd seen it. I actually kind of forgot that there was a pretense that it was for a movie. I kind of just remembered in my head, oh no, it was just auditions for his girlfriend. Like that's what they
Yeah,
were auditioning for. Like, in my head, that's what I remembered, and I thought it was like kind of really quirky because of that. But then
yeah,
watching it, I'm like, no, this is they're clearly saying they're tricking these women into doing this. This is
mhm,
wrong, and this is like the fault of the character, and we're going to explore that, and that's going to be part of you know why he maybe deserves some comeuppance, but maybe not to the extent that he gets.
yeah,
Clearly, so and so it's actually it's got some deep elements to it, and I think that's what's again, monster as metaphor. The whole thing's examining a part of our culture. It's examining the objectification of women and kind of the damage that can do. And in this case, the damage comes back to bite collective men in the ass. So
mhm, yeah,
that's what the movie's about. It's also really creepy. It's really well directed.
mhm,
Like I said, that moment where she smiles when the phone starts ringing, I'm
yeah.
like, yes, it's so creepy. I love it.
Does uh, just out of curiosity, does Blade of the Immortal have any like really scenes that just make you like go like ugh, like uh
It's very gory, but I would say it's more fun, like
okay, because
slashing
I
arms off and shit. Gore,
yeah
not like, oh,
I
this is disgusting.
I love Takashi Miike, but I feel like every movie I watch of his, there's always at least some point where I'm like, ugh. Like I think like pretty soon after this, I was like, oh man, now I gotta watch Ichi the Killer, and yeah,
Well,
there were scenes in that was like, oh,
I think he had a phase, late 90s, early 2000s, where he was like that with every movie, whereas now I feel like he's doing a variety of different things that are completely,
keep in mind,
so,
like you said, he has directed like 100 movies.
yeah. Yeah, I don't
Ridiculous.
think all 100 of them fall into what you just said somehow.
Yeah.
So, it's a lot of
Um,
movies. It's a lot of movies.
I'm kind of surprised, and I mean, not that I want this because I'm sure it'd be awful, but I'm kind of surprised they never tried to remake it for America because I feel like this was around that same kind of
Oh, it was, yeah.
Japanese horror boom.
This was a year after the Ring, and then like what, a year, 2 years before The Grudge. It was
Yeah.
right in that era. In fact, I remember when I was buying the DVDs of all of them, they were all under the same label when I bought them. They were all under the Asia Extreme like
Oh right,
label.
right.
So yeah, it was definitely part of that era. But
Yeah.
I guess they just thought, oh no, we're not touching this. This is too risky
Fair.
for
Yeah.
mainstream American cinema. I think that was probably the thought
Well,
process. Um,
like you said though, maybe now's the time.
it's super. Well, I don't really want them to though. Like it's fine on its own. It doesn't need to. It doesn't
Yeah.
need to be. I think if you want to critique it though, you can critique the pacing. It's just under 2 hours long. You maybe could have like maybe just
If,
briskened it up a little bit. If that's not even a word, is it? Made
yeah,
it briskier. Made it a bit more brisk in the opening
yeah.
half, maybe to just sort of like get the ball rolling a little bit. But
Yeah, like if I have one complaint, it's minor, but like it's rewatching it once you know what's gonna happen. it is a little bit like the first time you're watching it, it's like, okay, like where's this going? I heard something weird's gonna happen, but nothing's happening so far, and then you're kind of waiting, and then it happens, and then you're hooked, and then watching it, knowing it, it's a little bit more like, okay, like this isn't badly
I
done,
think
but I am waiting for the thing.
I think if you're there just for the surface level horror movie of it, I think you'd feel that way. I think if
Sure.
going into it this time, and I was like sort of looking at the themes, and I was looking at actually what it was doing with objectification and sexism, and there's just the idea that women only exist to be the ideal versions that men would want. Like that's kind of what the movie's tackling, right?
Mhm.
Looking at it from that perspective and actually paying attention to all the things he's doing and saying and the way he's treating all the people in his life around him. Even his housekeeper that he's got like a housekeeper that he pays. Yeah. And at one point she's like, "Oh, a man would be nothing without a woman," and he does like just analyzing all those little things. There's actually a lot of really good thematic things in that first half. It just goes on a little bit for a while before it gets to the creepy stuff, and maybe you could cut that down a little bit. But
how did your Blu-ray look? Because I'm watching this on like an old DVD copy that I have, and the video quality is not the best.
It's it looks better than the DVD. I remember the DVD looking really crummy. In fact, I remember a lot of those Asian movies from that time period looking really bad in DVD. There was like a really weird thing where they just didn't transfer very well.
If I had to guess, they're probably just like, people don't care about quality. Like they just know that they want these movies, so let's just kind of get them as fast as we can.
It was definitely better than the DVDs. It was definitely, you could tell it was a sort of rougher looking movie typically than that, but I certainly didn't have much of a problem with it. But again, you're jumping from the SD version to 1080, but no. So that is Audition, and little did he know that he was auditioning for her to be her next victim.
Okay.
That was poetry in motion, and you know what. So Tim, I guess we need to rate the movie though. So what would you rate Audition?
8.5. Really good. Like it.
I like that rating a lot. I think 8.5. I think it's just not quite amazing enough to get the 9, but it's really really great.
I could see myself like maybe back in like 2000 2001 whenever I first watched this, maybe I was a little more excitable. I might have been like, oh yeah, this is like a 9 or something. But yeah, watching it again, it's really really good. There's
what I will
great
say
themes.
What I will say about it though, just to say it's of that era, it's like the only Japanese horror movie of that era that I know of that isn't a ghost with long hair. So I'm going to give it bonus points just for being different to the rest of them as well. But
I mean, we rewatch a lot of this stuff. Again, I really, there's no bones or surprise about it, whatever. That I love Ju-on. That's a favorite of mine. But a lot of those other, Japanese horror movies from that time that we rewatched, some of them I feel like didn't hold up that well, and I think this is definitely one that holds up, and like you said, if anything, maybe even more relevant today.
That's super relevant because it has a lot more going on. There's a lot of themes, and it's actually analyzing a topic a bit more as opposed to just being here. This is creepy, right? Which can be good if it's well made, but this seems to have more meat in the bone. So, but that is Audition. So by all means, let us know what you think of Audition in the comments below. Like and subscribeth and all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. If you want to support the channel, over at patreon.com/mailfuzztv, you can do that over there. There is a link in the description, but otherwise that is it. So keep watching scary movies. We'll hopefully have an episode next week. Is it looking likely, Tim? I don't know if we talked about that yet.
I think it's likely.
I think it's likely. Cool. It's not that I skipped a week. We're doing quite well for this being the slim period, but there we go. So that is Audition. So thank you once again. Keep watching scary movies, guys, and we'll see you next time.